If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Now, when we talk about the positional or trade values and a lot of attention, I guess, at this point being cast on the fact that players off the table as it relates to draft day trades, I wonder, first of all, if we're going to see some baseball-type language employed where we see picks maybe traded for future considerations, wink, wink, nod, nod, perhaps a player that we've discussed in private.
That wink, wink, nod, nod is going to cost you dearly. Well, I would be and I've heard this discussed. The commissioner has made it very clear that if any of that goes on, and we find out about it, there's going to be more hell to pay than a little bit. And I don't know. And how do you quantify that? And how do you follow up with that? I don't know that's going to happen. I think it'd be too subjective. Obviously, you can't trade players. You can't trade picks that include a player. That's very prohibitive. That will limit it to a degree. I initially thought that you couldn't trade for trades for the ensuing years. You can. That's if we have a draft.
Right.
Now, there are some saying you're running the risk that, okay, New England, I'm calling this the New England Invitational, not the NFL 2011 draft. You got 6 picks in the first 100. You own this draft. This is typical of New England to take those 6, fall back, parlay a couple into next year's draft, and get the 3 or 4 guys we want. 6 rookies in the first 100 aren't going to make this Patriot team, so why would you make those picks? To do that this year, there is some risk that, hey, maybe there isn't a draft next year. So you may be throwing some value off for nothing. Now, there's going to be the draft, and so they'll likely do that, but you do so at a little bit of risk.
Well, and I guess the other thing that we notice, in addition to the Jimmy Johnson attributable value chart that we so fondly refer to on draft day and try to match up trades that involve picks from the same year, typically if we're trading away a second rounder this year, it'll net to a first the next. If we trade away a third rounder this year, normally we're going to move up one round into next year. Because of the inability to get some of these guys up to speed quickly, or the expectation of that, do we see a change in value toward next year's picks?
Well, actually, we tore up the value chart a little while ago primarily because of the money, particularly in the early rounds, because it didn't take into account what it cost you to go from 8 to 1 or 2. Everybody's scrambling back to find those charts now because, indeed, if there is the rookie salary cap and the money is not a huge issue, that value chart is pretty good. And I think we may see a few more trades because now you can pin it strictly on the value and not have to worry about the money.
If you were a team like New England, for example, that finished strong and has to like a number of the components that they have, and I guess still a lot of mystery surrounding whether it's 4th-year or 6th-year players that are ultimately going to find themselves eligible for free agency, is this a year, and especially given the bounty of picks, where you could see yourself trading away a number of those to get picks in a year where, again, you're going to have OTAs and a regular training camp and the time to get guys up to speed, especially when you can already kind of count a cachet of riches?
It depends on the value of the talent that you're looking at. This year's draft is a working man's draft. There are some good, solid players. It's not a sexy draft. There's not a lot of spectacular players. There will be spectacular players that come out of it, but they're not identifiable right now. So, yeah, this would be a year to do that, to say, you know what, we're pretty set. Let's see what next year brings. We don't want to pay. The last thing you want to do is draft a bunch of guys and pay them a bunch of signing bonus money, and they don't make your club. So that's why you push it towards, and why New England's gotten on this path where they're, constantly in this position. They've gotten into a nice cycle because it's a combination of being pretty good and stockpiling these drafts. All it takes is one bad year, and that'll, you got to pay up the credit card. They'd use it all in 1 year. So far, they got that cycle going pretty good.
Talking some NFL draft with Coach Billick here from Mother's Grill in Federal Hill. And, Coach, as we start to talk about some specific players, and a guy that we have a certain affinity for here, he's been a friend of the show with me for the last couple of months now leading into the draft. Torrey Smith, he's the one guy that I guess we could type his name into a search engine today, and we will find fans of all 32 teams, not only with an eye on him and saying that they would like him, but also with an expectation that there's going to be a spot in the draft where they can get him. In terms of the wide receiver hierarchy that you already started to lay out for us, well, where do you see Torrey, first of all?
Good young man. I don't have him in a first-round pick. I think and I don't know what the Ravens are going to do. I've not talked to the Ravens about anybody. The Ravens need to address the wide receiver position. That's the one area, the one Achilles heel, and I was a part of that. So I'm part of that pox on your house mentality as well. That whether it's Travis Taylor, whether it's Mark Clayton, DeVard Darling, the top 4 receivers for the Ravens right now, Derek Mason, Anquan Bolden, Stallworth, and Hushmanzada, all came from someplace else. It's the one area where the draft has failed the Ravens. I don't think once you get past A.J. Green and Julio Jones that the first round is the place to remedy that. I think there's some value in the second round. And keep in mind, in the second round, unlike the quarterback position, Greg Jennings came out of early in the second round. Sidney Rice. The list goes on and on. Eddie Royal. There's a lot of guys that have been very successful in the league, and I think there's a group of receivers that are going to be there in the second round for the Ravens, whether it be a Titus Young, the Cobb kid from Kentucky, Baldwin from Pittsburgh. There's a lot of guys there that could present some pretty good value with the second round. I don't think receiver, and I like Torrey Smith, I don't know that there's not going to be better value with the 26th pick than Torrey Smith.
Well, and when we start to talk about him, he's a guy that I would think on draft day is certainly going to be haunted by the shadow, let's say, that may linger over him, cast by one Darius Hayward-Bay. Another Terp speedster that was certainly a much later pick, though, that you have some familiarity with in Jermaine Lewis. When we start to talk about top-end speed, is Smith a guy that we can put in that category?
Yeah, but not to the degree. Darius Hayward-Bay was like ungodly speed. I was a little surprised by the 40 time of Smith. Leonard Hankerson, who's a more complete receiver, ran the same 40 time. So he's not the ultimate take the top off the defense type of speed. Maybe he can be that guy. And speed is relative. It's one thing to be able to run fast, but you got to be able to do something with it, both intermediate and if the ball is thrown to you deep. And so that's all part of the factor as well. That's overplayed sometimes. Value at receiver in this year's draft begins in the second round.
Coach, as we see so many teams evolving into spread offenses and offenses at the college level that may not resemble the NFL, but certainly with wide receiver being a position where we typically expected a one-year learning curve or more, it seems that more and more often we're getting guys into the league that are ready to play right away. Do we credit that to the more sophisticated offenses we're seeing employed at the college level?
Not really, because it doesn't matter what the sophistication is. What kind of route runner are you? Can you get off press? Actually, the receiver position is one that is probably as tough a transition into the NFL as any because of the matchups, because we just talked about that good group of corners. It is a transition. And even an A.J. Green or a Julio Jones, to think they're going to come in and have a 90-catch year. Mike Williams in Tampa Bay had an incredible first year. That guy fell to the fourth round for some different issues. He had off-the-field issues that obviously got cleaned up, or at least thus far have been cleaned up. So he was a great find. Unbelievable productivity, particularly for a rookie. But the expectations on an early round draft choice for the receiver positions very rarely are realized until now the second and third year.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.